The final whistle's gone. I've come outside with a bottle of beer, wouldn't you? Haven't you? So yeah, it's 7 minutes to 5 and we've been outclassed. One of the commentators said it. Pompey have been outclassed. That doesn't mean to say we're outclassed as a squad or as a team, but on this occasion, this particular match, we were done in every department, kippered. We got a damn good hiding. How many times can you ever remember any time in football when a team gets beaten 4-0, and their man of the match is their keeper? But that is how it was this afternoon against Birmingham. Bursic was our man of the match. He pulled off some utterly fantastic saves. What could that score have been? It could have been 7-8-9. It could. And it would have been 0 because the closest we came to scoring a goal was when I think Kuznevsky had a deflected shot almost loop in and their keeper Beadle just palmed it over the bar. It could have been really embarrassing. In fact, it was just a bit embarrassing. And the rest of the league will have looked at that score and gone, do you know what? We thought they might be double something, Pompey. But they're not. Hang on, I'll have a swig. So, 4-0. Right. One thing, before we talk about the game, I do want to talk about the game, obviously. But one thing that just attracted my attention before the game, and that was there was a remembrance ceremony or an event. And it was well staged, of course. And the crowd and the players were very respectful, of course. But there is a vagary about remembrance ceremonies in that in the official line, it is to remember all of those who lost their lives, whether they were service personnel or civilians or emergency personnel. And the implication is that we are remembering not just British or Allied losses, but we are remembering the losses on the other side. Now, this is prior to a game of football. It's a very serious moment. Everybody on the pitch, the players all linked arms, as you saw, and the crowd fell silent, and there was a rendition of the last post, a piece of bugle music which is played to remember the fallen. But you suspect that it is, of course, predominantly our fallen. People who have families who lost someone during the Second World War, or maybe the Korean War, which is or indeed, its remembrance is also about remembering the victims of terrorism. So there are people being remembered by people who were watching or were there at the ground before the game, who were becoming a little bit more emotional in a different way to how they normally are prior to a game of football. The reason I mention this is because when I started going to football and the players would have a little remembrance service or ceremony, whatever you want to call it, event, to mark the fact that Armistice Day, Remembrance Sunday is heaving into view, it was an all-British affair. I just think it's interesting. That's all I'm going to say. Interesting that the Pompey players lined up and linked arms, and they looked across the centre circle over some ornate poppies. Huge carpet was laid in the centre circle at the ground, and they looked at a team comprising of 3 Japanese, 2 Germans, an Irishman and a fellow South Korean. When I say a fellow South Korean, of Yang, of course. Park Seung-ho is South Korean. Remember that South Korea is still technically at war with North Korea, because that strange war, the Korean War, was never finished. There was no agreement between the two sides to call peace. Obviously, there are different type of hostilities going on at the moment, and they're largely diplomatic, and may that always be the case. What I'm saying is, prior to the game of football, there was a very thought-provoking ceremony, and one of the commentators after the ceremony and before the actual kickoff, he was talking to his other commentator about whether or not that affected the players. And I'm not going to go cheap and say that Pompey were more affected than Birmingham, because Birmingham came out of the blocks on fire. They'd already had their hairdryer treatment before the game. They were absolutely blazing. I'm not going to say blazing guns, because that would be clumsy, bearing in mind I've just been talking about respecting the victims of conflicts. But so I won't say that. But what I will say is that they didn't half come out at us, didn't they? Now, of course, the Pompey detractors will say that we were caught short, we weren't committed, we were dozing on the ball, we were dozing, we didn't have any adrenaline, we were lazy, we were lethargic, we were turned off, tuned out. And maybe there is something in that, but why? I'm not going to say again that it was the ceremony, of course not. Shouldn't be, because if it affected anybody, it seemed to affect Birmingham more than us. But anyway, we were not at the races for the first 15, 20 minutes, were we? We just weren't there. They could have walked the ball into the net 4 or 5 times. They very nearly did. It would have been no injustice whatsoever for there to have been 3 or 4 on the board after the first 20 minutes. And then, interestingly enough, suddenly we got back into the game. We got back into the game really well. Suddenly we were pinging it around. We weren't necessarily penetrating them with any of the passing movements that we were doing, but we were certainly in control. We were the better side for the second half of the first half. We flipped on the Pompey Plus coverage, the guys in the media centre at Fratton Park, and they were saying exactly the same thing. It looked as though we were going to come out for the second half and we were going to be firing on all 4 cylinders, and Birmingham better watch out. That so didn't happen. Let's talk briefly about their goals. First of all, a free header from a corner kick. Didn't he take it well? I mean, I know he had nobody harassing him, and they will be looking at that at Pompey when they start, breaking the game down. Why wasn't he being picked up? I think it's partly because we were doing something called zonal marking, where you mark a piece of territory regardless of who's in it and who's not in it. But what that can do is create an awful lot of space behind the zones that are being patrolled, and that's exactly what happened. Was it Iwata who got that header, and didn't he take it well? He picked his spot. And when you're heading the ball that's travelled 30 yards through the air and you've got to head it, you're 12 and 15 yards out, and you can pick your spot, you're a footballer. And he did it, and he did it well. Was it a penalty? I'm biased, so I don't think so. I think he was he kind of run out of ideas, and he looked down and he saw a yellow sock. And he thought, if I play my cards right, I can make out that that's tripped me up. So down he went. Fair play to him. We take it. If it came our way, they took it. It came their way. But our man of the match, Bursic, saved it. It was a pretty weak penalty, actually. And it may have been the beginning of an indication that Birmingham actually thought, well, we're going to win this at a canter, which actually they did. So we don't have to try very hard here. We don't have to roll up our sleeves, bang everything, bang all the one-on-ones, bang all the big moments, the aerial combat. We don't have to do that. These guys are pussycats. They're a pushover. And we're going to be able to take them, really, with one hand tied behind our backs. And that's why, perhaps, after that penalty didn't go in, they seemed to go off the boil a little bit. Having said that, I hate saying having said that, but anyway, having said that, they had a couple of pretty seriously good chances, in fact, even when they're playing in second gear against us. And we were playing in third gear, but we weren't making any penetration. Now, why? Oh, well, if I knew that, I'd be Pompey manager, wouldn't I? And so would you. We don't really, do we? But we can pretend we do. Yang, it seemed to me, played a little bit like a man who knew that he was going to be substituted off the pitch after about 50 minutes. Which is exactly what happened. Was he forewarned or did he work it out for himself? He's not stupid. Kirk, who might also have realised that he was going to be substituted after about 50 minutes, and he was, kept at it. It wasn't particularly productive what he did, but he did not stop. He chased everything. He harried and he ran. And he did more than that on the occasions when he had a sniff of the ball, and they were so attentive, the Birmingham players, when they were pressing us all over the pitch. They were so attentive. They were on you, like greased lightning. Bang, there they were. You got the ball, you thought you were in space, 2 yards of space. No, there's somebody snapping at your ankles straight away. And Kirk had plenty of those occasions, and I thought he dealt with them pretty well. Pretty well. He certainly didn't give up. Well, he's an Aussie. They don't, do they? Now, on came Lang. Lang? I wish he had. On came Murphy. Where'd that come from? Wishful thinking. On came Murphy and on came Bishop. And you got the impression that that was a planned double substitute. It was going to happen come what may unless we were 3-0 up, which we weren't. So you got the impression that Messino is now considering playing a game in which you have these tactical substitutions that have been planned and trained for. So they would have trained Murphy and Bishop for the fact that they were going to come on at 50 minutes and have half the game, what with added time being what it is now, more than half the game, playing against a slightly tiring, hopefully, Birmingham defence. This is a tactic, this is a plan, this is a strategy. This is a way to get beat 4-0. So it seems. However, it didn't quite work because we couldn't get the ball to Lang, giving him an opportunity to run at a single defender. They were all over him like the proverbial rash. And ditto with Bishop. We couldn't get the ball across to him. Plenty of people tried. It fell short, and the Birmingham defender who was in front of Bishop got to it first easily, with Bishop 3 or 4 or 5 yards behind them, hoping that they'd miss it or something. And if it went long, it was too long for Bishop. Their centre half was 6'6". Well, it seemed 6'6". So he didn't get any opportunities to shine, to show what he can do. So then comes the question. This is my question. This is my final question to you, dear Pompey sound listener, Pompey fan, person who is thoroughly downcast this Saturday evening or Sunday morning, whatever you've got here. Was it a warm-up for Wrexham? Did we decide that Birmingham was probably going to be a bridge too far? We'll let it go. We won't bring anything back. But we're going to play a Wrexham side as our middle of 3 games this week. And we think we can get something there. If Fratton is behind us, if it's a wet and windy night, blowing a gale and the floodlights are just blazing down through the rain, can we do to Wrexham what they did to Coventry on Friday night? A result, by the way, which suggests that they are a coming force. And of course they're a coming force. They've got an awful lot of money behind them. And speaking of a lot of money, I found out during the game that Birmingham I did not know this. I'm sure you did, good listener, because you probably are more up to date with things going on everywhere across the EFL than me. But anyway, I found out during the game from one of the commentators that Birmingham are planning a £3 billion new stadium. That's 3 billion. Now, whose money is that and where does it come from? Some sort of American investment, heritage, hedge fund banking thing. What do they do? Where do they get their money? Who do they take their money from to be worth as much money as that? Is it from ordinary poor people each of whom contributes somehow, some way, inadvertently and without their actual explicit knowing opinion, I'm sounding socialist here, contribute 50 cents a month, and it all mounts up, possibly something along those lines. It doesn't come from nowhere, that kind of wealth. It comes from somewhere. We don't know where it comes from, but in the case of the investors in Birmingham, we know where it's going. It's going into a huge stadium that's going to match that thing that they've got at Everton now, which is reputed to be the best stadium in the country. I haven't been, probably never will. But there are some stadiums going around, and there is some money coming into football, particularly if you manage to get into the Premier League. And if you're going to spend $3 billion on a stadium, then you're going to want Premier League football. And if you have to buy players at 20, 30, 40 million quid in order to do that, that is nothing compared to your £3 billion stadium. So that's who we're up against. And I am, for one, starting to come round to the argument that John Messino needs a little bit more help, a slightly bigger wallet, a slightly deeper pair of trouser pockets. I'm sorry, that's a disturbing image. Eliminate it if you can. So, all in all, lessons learned, what are they? If you're not careful, they can embarrass you. Any of these championship sides. But, at the same time, we're still better off than we were this time last year. So, all is certainly, definitely, utterly, totally not lost. Let's just get some of these injured legs back on what John Messino likes to call the grass, and then let's get them on at Fratton Park. How we need Murphy, how we need Bishop to be firing on all cylinders, how we need Segacic. Remember him? The Duracell bunny? How different would we have looked and felt with him out there against Birmingham? And ditto, of course, Lang, who I want back so much, I accidentally suggested that he came on against Birmingham. That's how much I want him back, because he frightens the opposition. He'd frighten me, standing next to me at the bar. He might have arrived later than me, but I'd let him get served first, wouldn't you? I mean, he only comes up to your chin, but he'd come up to it too often, if you know what I mean. And that's just a joke, and not intended in any way to support the notion of fisticuffs or even conflict, especially on a day when we remembered that there's more to football, more to life than football, and that conflict is something that should be avoided at all costs, because it's just as painful for each of the sides who are stuck with partaking of it. Thanks for listening. If it's Saturday night, I hope you sleep all right. If it's Sunday morning, stand by, because we'll be bringing you a digest of the game with the various match reports and interviews and what have you, so that we can do a more conventional reprise. Talk soon. Take care.